Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us, those intentionally or those that kind of stumbled upon us. So Sonia and I here, we created a little bit of an elevator pitch so that you can get to know us a little bit and why we're here. So, Sonia and I are two curious working moms. We have backgrounds in research and consulting, and we come across interesting articles and news and trends all the time. And what we wanted to do was start responding to those from both a professional business approach and let's face it, like real moms who are sometimes losing their minds, like we are right now with Christmas fast approaching, from that approach as well. So we're here to laugh and to learn. And I'm gonna just start by asking Sonia kind of how her morning went, and we're gonna go from there.
Yeah, so we've actually talked about this topic before, so it's going to be a little strange to work backwards, but there are a lot of mornings where when Christine and I checked in to get ready for the day's work ahead, it all came down to was I ready based on how my kid started off his morning? So I know a lot of parents out there feel the same way. Did the kids sleep well? Did they eat breakfast? Did they fight with me about what they were wearing for school? And one of our fights last year, and then it continued this year for a different reason in the morning, is getting on the school bus. Um, and yet, as a working mom, I cannot imagine having to do car line duty every day or not have the bus for a lot of different reasons, right? I trust that person with driving my kid no matter what the weather is. And also, the school system allows your child to arrive at school and not be counted tardy if it's the bus's fault. But if it's the parent's fault for running a little bit late, or there was even an accident, like a traffic accident, something else, I mean, the child is marked tardy. So there have been times that have frustrated me where the bus hasn't come on time, and then we've even had some recent issues where the bus driver was less than ideal to help my student start out, the morning, and that's part of what led to the morning drama. So I had reached out to Christine several of the mornings saying, what's going on with bus drivers? And it kind of led us to first talk about, which is what you do when you get slightly older. Back when I was young, this is how it was. So first, Christine and I talked about, our bus drivers, and I had maybe only two or three bus drivers that I remember in my life. They were consistent. They were the same person year after year, doing the same route, watching me grow up. And even though you might think of your bus driver as just, the first 15 minutes of the day and the last 15 minutes of the day, I lived in a place where we had integrated busing for years, and that led me sometimes to have an hour or more each way on the bus. And so the bus driver that was most memorable to me, I mean, everybody can list teachers who are memorable to them, right? But I actually had a bus driver who was memorable to me. She had an additional job. So I did know that bus drivers typically have to work more than the bus job. Um, she had a job with Lance Crackers, and she would always have snacks and save them for the last few kids who had this really long drive with her. And I had time on the bus to talk about my day with her and how it went and what I liked, to tell her what I was learning in school, to complete all my homework, to eat the snack with her, and take a nap. So I know she enjoyed conversations with me. I enjoyed conversations from her. I benefited, and kids always benefit from consistent positive relationships in their life. So, I mean, that was a big part of my life. And then I started asking people about their bus drivers too. So, Christine, do you remember your bus drivers?
I do. And there were I'm gonna age myself here, but back then there was no seat belts. There were, you went down a bumpy back road and you were standing up holding onto the seats, jumping with the bus as it went over the bumps. But um in my tiny little town that I grew up in, that was really concentrated. We had 9 buses at that time. And I know that because I was on bus number 9. It was the bus that kind of hit the houses that were the furthest away from the school. And you're still only talking about a 10-minute drive to school. And I look at my kids' school now, and they have 4 buses for a much larger area. Now, my question in that is there a shortage going on? Is there a busing shortage? Is there a crisis in bus driving workforce? And why? What are the challenges? And Sonia, you probably have a better perspective on this because this is an interaction that you have every single day. Is there something going on in this particular sector of this industry that we need to know about and that needs more attention? So are you seeing something? Are you hearing anything in the grapevine?
Yeah, I think it's
What
important
are you
to
coming across?
understand the system and then the ecosystem in which the public school bus transportation exists and lives. So if you take it by itself, you're like, oh, there's just a vehicle that brings kids to school and from school. And, it can't be that hard. You just find somebody with a decent driver's license, and no criminal record, and you have them do the work. Well, I'm not driving a school bus and you're not driving a school bus. And that hits me every day about how complicated the work is, how different it's become. The school bus drivers that we have now today are not just driving buses. Not only are they carrying our most precious cargo back and forth, but they're expected to do it without any accidents and a much greater liability if there are. There are cameras on buses now to watch both students and drivers, but honestly, I mean, I'd be nervous if somebody had a camera on me all day and there's not always sound and it's so, they're being watched. The pay isn't necessarily the greatest, and the hours, while it could be a perfect fit for somebody who needs the middle of the day chunk to themselves, when it's 24 degrees outside and it's pitch dark, I'm grateful for the person who woke up at 4 in the morning to get all the way to the bus, like metro center, where all of the buses are supposed to start, and then turn on their GPS tracker and then come to do a high school route. And if
Hmm.
there aren't enough drivers, they have to double back and do a second route. Then they do an elementary school route, and then they come and do a middle school route. By that point, there's a couple of hours for lunch. Then they start all over and do it again for high school that gets out early, et cetera, et cetera. And so, these are people who are taking a job that has decent pay, but not enough pay to keep my household running. They're having to deal with students, but they don't necessarily have education backgrounds. It's not even a qualification that you have to like kids or be nice to kids, which may be part of the problem that I had with a recent bus driver. And then they're liable for their lives, and they run in sleet and hail and ice, and we're all counting on them to get our kids there so we can get to work. Having said that, transportation is one of the biggest costs in a school system's budget next to the salaries and all of that. It costs for the gas, it costs for the bus vehicles themselves, maintenance. Then you're paying bus drivers. A lot of them, if they're working a full shift, will get benefits. Some of them don't. But then there's high turnover. So there's the costs of that training and onboarding and then retraining and the hiring that comes with it. So, it's a whole engine of itself. And it's all because in our country, we have education as a right. And so then we provide transportation as a right in order to access that education so that we're not leaving anybody out. So it's a beautiful reason, but it's a system that hasn't really grown with the times. The closest thing they did to grow with the times that I'm aware of actually has led to more of a brittle nature. And that is during COVID, when schools were shut down and we weren't sure how long things were going to be shut down and virtual, bus drivers had to go. So a lot of them retired and a lot of them were laid off or cut. So they had to go find other work or, just join community and do other things. That was smart. That was an efficiency of school systems to keep the schools running. However, it's been then difficult to try to get people back from all of the other issues. So there are a lot of states, going back to your original question, is there a shortage that have been reporting shortage? Um,
I'm thinking too, Sonia, about this, the sort of trickle effect from it all as well. So I know school start times has been something that me and some of the other parents have discussed, where it's, they're sending my kids are still in elementary school. It starts very early. And then, middle school and high school. And there's been complaints. Why do they start so early? Why do the older kids get to start so late? And it's because, like you said, they're recycling the bus drivers. The bus drivers have to do all of those routes. There's not dedicated drivers, at least here, and it sounds like there too. There's not dedicated drivers for each school. There's the same driver. They're going to pick kids up for elementary. They have to get them dropped off. And if there's somebody that's late or somebody that's trying to run for the bus and that bus is even 2 to 3 minutes late, there's that trickle down effect of now the kids after that are maybe not getting to school on time and how that affects their life and their parents' lives who rely on a certain time to get to work. So it's a system that has challenges in and of itself, but it's also affecting all of these other external systems that are connected to it. And so it's surprising to me that there hasn't been more emphasis on trying to get this transportation system brought up current to where we're at, to where we're trying to operate.
Yeah, there's a lot of parents in my neighborhood and just in our city, frankly, who have given up and think that the better option for them becomes drop off and pick up and sitting in the car line. And I pass these people and just wonder how many hours are you spending there? And you do this a lot, Christine, right? Because, and I'll get to this in a second. Um, but I pass them and there's how many hours are you spending in getting there on time to sit and wait? There's pollution in the air and so if you're a walker, then you got to walk through that. It's holding up traffic and business. People have to reroute their lives when they know that there's a school on a particular street and gosh, there's one street here that has 4 or 5 schools on it, and I will do anything to get around going on that road. But another cost saving measure that schools instituted. So you mentioned one of them. One of them is changing the timing of schools. That some people in education will tell you it's because of the developmental um, nature and positioning of these students, that high school kids don't wake up until a certain time, their brains don't function, and then their brains shut down. And elementary school kids and middle school kids need the most sleep, and so we're going to start them later. But there is also the transportation issue that had to be figured out that makes it so that high school starts earlier and then the elementary school and then the middle school are they're staggered in that way. And I'll tell you that my son at at the beginning of this school year, I got something that said that um his bus was going to come at 6:50. And I believe the school doors don't even open until 7:30, and the school's only about 10 minutes away. Um, the bus driver, because of her first route before elementary school and the next route she needed to get to, felt like she couldn't risk coming any later or whatever, couldn't risk letting the kids sleep and getting that in for them. So she started picking them up as early as 6:20 or 6:30. And the only reason I knew was because they had this tracking app. So we would rush out there. And so not only was it so early for my kid, and then it caused anxiety to get him on time, depending on what was good for the driver. But then they sat in the school parking lot for sometimes anywhere from 15, which is fine, to 30 minutes. And she would just tell the kids to take a nap. But we had already rushed them to wake them up. So these kids were like hurrying up to stop.
Right.
It just, it doesn't make sense, but you can understand the complexity of the driver's needs and the expectations that have been set for them and how they're being tracked all the time to kind of keep up with this. The cost saving measure that was somewhat smart but has big repercussions is what affects you, which is in my school system, if you're within a 1 mile radius of the school, you are not guaranteed transportation. You are expected to walk, or take a bicycle, and a lot of parents end up resorting to car because you can never tell with the weather.
Hmm.
Don't want your kids out in the rain or out in the extreme cold for a long time. And frankly, you don't want to leave the bike there. There's just so many of these little variables, but it's because it's a cost saving measure. It's not a safety measure. It would be better for the kids who lived in a 1 mile radius to get a brisk walk in every day. It's not a health measure. It would be better for those parents living within 1 mile.
Yes.
It's, uh, and what I keep asking myself, Christine, my husband and I talk about this all the time, and he is convinced that like um, oh, what are those vehicles called? Not cyber trucks, but the robotic taxis that
Oh yeah, like the Tesla ones that
yes,
are coming out.
that
Yeah.
that's going to be the future. And while I can see a future in which a self-driving minibus will pick up the kids, I still don't know if our transportation systems, particularly our public transportation systems, are taking into account what the future of school transportation needs to look like and how it merges with public transportation and mass transportation needs. So there is one group, one state that had some money during COVID and decided to hire a company called Hop Skip Drive, I think, to fix their bus issues. So Hop Skip Drive came in and consulted with them, and then each week took a look at the ridership, the routes, and the availability of multiple vehicles. And it was a combination of city buses, Ubers, and something else. And then depending on what the route was that was rated the best, that could get the kid to school on time, it set that as the child's, vehicle of choice for the week. That sounds interesting. I'm not sure why it hasn't expanded or taken on. There was some mention of that just being expensive for districts, but I don't know what the difference is when districts can't afford new school buses or the maintenance on them. That was a huge reason that the bus broke down a lot last year. We had an amazing driver, very kind. She drove the bus because she wanted to spend time with her niece, who was also on that bus. And then that gave her, she had like just a kind ownership over the kids and their feelings and their thoughts and their experience in getting to school. Um, But when she was late, 45 minutes late, an hour and a half late, she would tell me it was too cold this morning. The bus didn't start. They don't have um, the crews that they need and the tools that they need to get there for all those buses in time. And this is what happens in large systems. So adding to the system understanding, because buses are expensive to maintain and to purchase even, it makes school systems want to get larger to be able to share and get those economies of scale. And there have been several towns where I live who want to break away from the larger county district. But when they take a look at the costs of where we are with transportation currently, our current solutions, they haven't been able to fathom making the changes that they keep saying they want for the betterment of children, and their actual education, the reason that the transportation exists, because they keep coming back to we can't afford the bus. And so I'm, just wondering what kind of planning we're doing for the future of transportation. And then how are we also looking at the transition between the two? So, I wish like in my district, if we were going to change the route, so we've already made changes where we have fewer drivers and they're doubling up on routes. If I knew that there was a plan that we were going to phase out buses and we were going to move to the autonomous vehicles or the varied hop, skip, drive move, or we were going to incorporate mass transit and we were going to combine with the city and county and states plan to bring mass transit in because it was going to benefit our students and not just working professionals getting to work. I would have a better, I would be more receptive to what's happening on a daily basis and what I'm afraid of is that we're just running this archaic system into the ground, and not planning for that future and also not setting up a transition plan. So I just had a hard time finding any information on that in particular. I saw stuff where we're trying to pay bus drivers a little bit more, helps marginally, but it's not
Yeah.
innovative or
I'm
disruptive to the current system.
I'm also thinking about it from a kind of a criminal justice aspect as well, because with autonomous vehicles, now you're talking about how many kids are in there, how is their behavior being watched, right? A lot of what bus drivers are doing now is they're having to be in charge of things like bullying,
Yeah.
which seems like it's becoming more pervasive, if anything. There's also the issue of
There was
liability,
always vandalism, like even
always
when you're younger,
vandalism.
right? Trying to stick a pencil into the seat or write on the seat or,
Yes,
yeah,
but long gone are the days where adults just let you settle it with a fist fight. Those days are gone. That doesn't happen anymore. So there's that. There's also a liability perspective for the schools in having to assess whether some of these things are options. So if you're talking about ride shares or an Uber or some kind of driving thing, the background screening of those drivers needs to be, I would say, as rigorous as the people that are in the school systems, maybe if not more, because now you're putting kids in a vehicle alone with a driver. So do those companies do the right kind of screening? Do they have the right kind of background checks? What is the liability for the school? There's so many aspects of it, but I think to just ignore it and try to say that we're going to stick with this sort of outdated system, it's clearly not working. Some days, yes, it does work, but I think a lot of people that would be listening to this that have kids would say that they have not gone a day where there has not been some maybe issue with a bus or
yeah,
even being in car line, which we hope a lot of people that are listening are sitting in car line listening to us discuss things like this. And
yeah,
I think there's a lot of research still out there. So I think it's a topic that can certainly be revisit it and maybe see what some places are doing. Maybe there's somebody that works in transportation that has some insight into something new that could be piloted somewhere.
A lot of times when workforce shortage is mentioned, I think we've all through COVID started to, or anybody who's thinking about a shortage and it's on their mind starts asking some formulaic questions. What are we paying that person? What are we looking for in skills? And what's our pipeline to get there? I guess I've been kind of trying to run scenarios in my head of what a pipeline of drivers could look like. What are we looking for? And who would fit that profile and want to do it and want to do a good enough job? And, based on experiences that I've had, I'm curious, like I said, the person worked at Lance Crackers. How are we building pipelines with shift workers who want to take an early shift ahead or
Hmm.
after? And building training programs and incentivization programs there. I'm kind of curious about that. I'm curious about anybody who's going to be working with children already. So at our bus stop, some of the parents, when we're waiting around the bus and we're pointing fingers at, which one of us is now going to drive them because the bus is that late or it's raining that hard, or um, I'm always thinking about I'm going to be liable for the children who then end up going in my car, even though it's the neighbor's kids, but
Yeah.
no, that's a lot of responsibility. And so I think about who is already asking for that kind of responsibility and may want that money or those hours. And I can imagine teachers in training who are going to be at that school, bonding with kids, holding them responsible for their behavior, getting to know if they even like the job before they start it, because you're not, you can you can do all the same kinds of cultural and management practice there. I don't know, people learning like pilots, Uber drivers, like could we build some pipelines and some additions to the shifts that they work?
Hmm.
Um, and I was also thinking about like my neighbors telling me who their bus drivers were when they were growing up. I've had some neighbors who have said it was teachers at their school. Um, Sometimes it was the gym teacher, the PE teacher for them, or and I want to be very clear as a former teacher, I am not saying teachers need one more thing on their plate, but I am curious about, is it an option that's open to teachers who also don't get paid enough already
Hmm.
to build that? Could it be an option to them
Right.
in a better way, particularly if you get assigned to the kids that are within that school or community already? Um, so yeah, so teachers in training was on my mind, teachers who work at the school. Where are our pastors and community leaders and helping with some of that? I know if you're the pastor of a church, a smaller church, you could use some income, um, and get to know your community and start to build in them. There were also people telling me, and this is a little wild for me to think about, that they had high school kids, high school football players as their bus driver, back in a small town in a different state. And the kids really looked up to and respected the hometown hero, who was
Hmm.
taken to school in the morning, which, I thought was interesting. So there are other solutions, and, those solutions may work better in rural areas. There's definitely different dynamics in a rural and a um, urban setting. So a lot of questions to ask.
Yeah, I guess at this point it's a lot of trial and error and piloting, right? So like that's what I want to see. As like a researcher, I want to see people taking up like the challenge and piloting things and seeing if it works. Let's see what works. That's the only way we're going to find a solution to anything.
Yeah, I would love to know more about where things are being tried out, what's being tried out, what's being thought of. Yeah, particularly because school itself is changing. And so transportation is going to have to change in order to survive for the people who are already in the field and are interested, but also in order to support, which is a much stronger point, to support the educational needs of our kids. Yeah,
Well, and that it kind of brings us to another discussion that I'm eager to have with you, which is workforce pipeline, the pipeline between education and careers. It's a big one that I'm excited to dig in with you.
yeah. I hope people enjoy this little thinking nugget um, that was started at the bus stop.
That's right. And we hope that everybody joins us again and listens in. And we certainly love all and any kind of feedback or ideas or thoughts or questions. So, yeah, join us again.
Take care.